Okay, so this is the current model using all the DNA and protein evidence that scientists have been able to make or create. And you see this one big group, eukarya, so true nucleus, basically what that means. And we have a couple things we recognize: animals, fungi, green plants, and then we have all these other sorts of smaller organisms that used to be in a different group, but now are kind of in our large group of animals and fungi. And then we have, it used to be all in one group, or split, archaea and bacteria. So these are all sorts of different kinds of microorganisms, bacteria that used to be all in one group. Now, through DNA, they're shown to be very different in the way their cells function. So it wasn't thought to be proper to have them all in one category before. If you look at it, see, proteobacteria are as different from thermoproteales as, say, proteobacteria are from microsporidia, which are very different. And these used to be grouped very close together. So this is more accurate in showing, the similarity of organisms. And this would what I would be learning back when I was your age. Basically, these 5 groups. Okay. So remember how complicated and branched those bottom, the archaea and eubacteria were. Those are all just in one group. But now we know there's so many more branches here than we ever thought. And another thing is really different. The protists kind of was a group of all sorts of different things that didn't fit in either plants, animals, fungi, or Monera. Now they're really separated and grouped more realistically based on their differences. So here's a little bubble map that I made showing similarities and differences. Similarities, we still have plants and animals as groups, fungi too. Bacteria are shown as being the oldest, and as we go through evolution, complexity increases. And then differences, we had a lot fewer categories in the old model, but now we have more. In the old, protists were one group, and now they're separated into many groups. And on 272, 273 will help you make this little cladogram. You see humans, bonobos, and chimpanzees grouped very closely together. And then gorillas and orangutans. Bonobos get a lot of attention because their behavior is really different from chimpanzees. Chimpanzees can be quite violent when interacting with other chimpanzee groups over territory, and even with their own groups. They're fighting for dominance. But bonobos are very marked in that they're not violent, and if they ever do get in a conflict, they tend to have sex with each other to alleviate the stress. So there's a lot of different studies. Really, why was this difference, in behavior made? Clearly, chimpanzees have been successful 8 million years with their more violent characteristics. And bonobos have been really successful too. And then where do humans fit in? We as humans, we know we have violent tendencies, but we also have amazingly kind tendencies towards each other. So it's almost like we're a split between bonobos and chimpanzees. Okay, so this is a good example of our figworts, how really it changed, our classification based on DNA. There 500 species of plants were placed into the figwort family based on similarities. But by looking at some data from chloroplast genes, which are very fundamental to the biology of these plants, they discovered, hey, they're really different. This reminds me a lot of the Monera. Okay, they're bacteria, single-celled, been here for a while, put them in one group. Now we have DNA. No, they're really different. So they had to reclassify them. So there's one, they finally decided there's one true figwort family, and then they came up with two new families, Calceolariaceae and Linderneaceae. Oh yeah. And then some moved into other groups that were already established, like plantains, which are kind of like bananas that aren't sweet. So I don't know. I've tried to eat plantains before. I'm like, where's the sugar? Anyway, and then Lindernia, that's a small flowering plant. I tried to get an example to show you. This is like this, but didn't really find anything. So you can look on 275. You can see how these, a little diagram, how the figwort family was separated into all these funky sounding groups. And remember, this is all, from DNA protein evidence, which we know is the most accurate way to classify things. And this reminds me, you've all seen that there's a graphic that has like a chimpanzee. I'm not gonna be able to draw it, but they have a chimpanzee, and then it gradually starts to stand up until it's a human. And that's a real misconception, and that's kind of what this graphic is showing. Oh, fish led to salamanders, cat, you. That's not how it works. Just as we know, your great-grandfather didn't turn into you, and then your father, you're separate, okay? We branch off. So what we really want to do is look at something more like this. All of our families, we branched off, and this is what's happened in evolution over time. Different species have branched off as they adapt to new conditions. And it doesn't mean, fishes, amphibians, amphibian turned into was a fish at one point. They had a common ancestor that was similar to a fish, but they changed over time based on conditions and the mutations that accumulated. And a couple things. Here is, phylogeny, showing, skunks, leopards, otters are really cool. We used to have a lot of otters. We still do in California. They were hunted a lot for there. They got really good fur. They're a mammal that lives in the ocean. They had to have a really good fur coat, nice and dense fur to keep them warm, and they were hunted a lot. Anyway, getting off topic. This red arrow shows the last common ancestor before you had that branching off in the cat group, and then dogs, otters, and skunks. And the two most closely related would be the dog and the wolf. You see how the shorter these lines are from the closest branching point, these are all the nodes, the last common ancestor, not much distance, so they're going to be more closely related. The least closely related would be these two. According to this chart, these two dogs are the dog and the wolf and the panther. And the other thing, these nodes are the last common ancestor. It's kind of a repeat of question number 1. I just wanted to show you this. I came across this because it comes up in the class. This supposed controversy between, say, people that believe in creation, the story of Genesis in the Hebrew Bible. And what we know about how evolution works and the evidence that we have. A lot of people think you have to either believe that biblical story or the science, and I just want to let you know that you don't have to do that. Especially take note of, say, theistic evolution. This is what the Catholic Church subscribes to, and that just means all the science is accepted, all the evidence. In the Catholic Church, we're known to be very conservative about a lot of things. They understand that the science is science. This is evidence, and they can't argue against it. I mean, what we see is what we see, and in order to argue against it, you have to have other evidence. So they're like, the evidence is good, and evolution, natural selection is what we see as the mechanism of evolution. The theistic part of it just means that a higher being, say, started it or drives it. And I kind of want to, like, we got a question of why and then how. And really science is looking at how is this happening. The why is it all happening, science can't say. This is where a lot of people look to religion. Not everybody, but you know, a big majority of people, you know, in this country and all around the world, claim to be religious and have a thought of a higher power. And this just isn't, you know, the Hebrew Bible. Every single religious text from when religious texts have been developed have a creation myth, and a lot of it revolves around some of the same ideas, something from nothing, which is also interesting because the Big Bang Theory is also, let me write that down, something. You see this in the old ancient Indian, you know, from India, you know, ideas about how the world began in Asia, Native American, you know, something from nothing, these tales that were then, you know, codified, something from nothing, and very similar to the Big Bang, which is, you know, has a lot of evidence behind it. So it's interesting, you know, Big Bang is something from nothing, and that's something that can be measured. So anyway, I think it's really interesting, this idea, you know, the intersection of science and religion. And my own son, my 11-year-old son, just the other day thought he had to choose one or the other. I said, no, Ivan, you can believe in what your faith teaches about, you know, how everything began. Science is just saying, you know, how it works. And you really shouldn't feel, you know, any kind of stress from that. Although, you know, society does put it upon us. We have to, you know, push back and say, no, we can believe in a lot of different things. And you see here, this is basically, you know, from denying any kind of information. There's a real continuum out there of beliefs surrounding evolution and how we understand how the world has changed. So, if you're having any kind of, you know, qualm or anything, you know, let me know. Tell me what your concerns are. I'd be really happy to know, because this is really an interesting part of science, foundation to biology, and, you know, we shouldn't let, you know, issues, you know, prevent us from learning it. It's really interesting, and I probably should have mentioned, have this diagram at the very beginning. Oh, all right, so we're done with evolution.